I woke up to voices outside my hospital room, speaking in hushed tones that weren't quite hushed enough. My sister Brenda's words cut through the morphine haze like a scalpel. "We need to decide this week. The doctor says she's not going to wake up properly anyway." 3 weeks in a coma, and they were already planning my funeral. I am grateful you are here with me. Before we begin, I would really love to know where you are watching from. Comment your city below. Now, let me tell you about something that changed my life forever. My fingers twitched against the thin hospital sheets. The movement sent electric pain shooting up my arm where the IV needle dug into my vein. I forced my eyes open wider, fighting against the weights that seemed attached to my eyelids. The fluorescent lights above burned like staring into the sun, but I kept them open. I had to stay conscious. I had to hear this. Marcus voted yes already. That was my brother's voice, Calvin, usually so warm and protective. Now he sounded like he was discussing a business transaction. He said the medical bills are draining Mom's estate faster than we can manage. My son, Marcus, my baby boy who I'd rocked through countless nightmares, who I'd put through college working double shifts at the plant. He'd voted yes to pulling my plug. I tried to move my head toward the door, but my neck muscles screamed in protest. The car accident had shattered my spine in 3 places. My legs lay useless beneath the blanket, 2 dead weights I couldn't feel. But my mind was sharp now, cutting through everything with crystal clarity. "Vanessa's the only one who voted to wait." Brenda again, and I could hear the eye roll in her voice. But she's always been emotional about these things. Too soft. My youngest daughter. At least one of my children wanted me alive. The door handle turned slowly, deliberately. I forced my eyes shut just as it opened, letting my breathing fall back into the shallow, rhythmic pattern I'd maintained for weeks. Footsteps approached my bed, 2 sets. The sharp click of heels and the soft shuffle of sneakers. "She looks peaceful, doesn't she?" Calvin's hand touched my forehead, gentle despite his earlier words. His palm was warm, familiar. "Maybe it's cruel to keep her like this." "The vote's 4-1. Brenda's perfume overwhelmed my senses, that expensive lilac scent she always wore. "We tell the doctor on Friday. That gives us 3 more days to get the paperwork sorted." My heart monitor beeped steadily, betraying nothing of the panic flooding my system. 4-1. 4 of my own family members had voted to end my life. I cataloged them mentally. Marcus, Brenda, Calvin, and who else? Who was the 4th vote? Narration mode. First person. I, my, me. The door clicked shut behind them, and I counted to 60 before opening my eyes. The ceiling tiles blurred above me, water-stained and familiar. I'd memorized every crack, every discoloration during the endless hours trapped in this bed. My right hand twitched against the thin sheet. The doctor said I shouldn't have any movement below my shoulders, but small rebellions were happening in my body. A finger curl here, a toe flex there. Things I kept hidden during their visits. I forced my arm to slide across my stomach, muscles burning like I'd been set on fire. The movement took 3 minutes. 3 agonizing minutes to travel 8 inches. My fingers found the call button dangling from the bed rail, but I didn't press it. Not yet. I needed to think. The 4th vote haunted me. Marcus, Brenda, Calvin, all spelled out. But who else? My sister Patricia lived in Memphis, too far away to be involved in daily decisions. That left only one possibility, and the thought made bile rise in my throat. Footsteps in the hallway again, different this time. The heavy, measured tread of someone carrying weight. The door swung open without a knock. A man in blue scrubs entered, checking the IV bag hanging beside my bed. I kept my breathing steady, eyes focused on nothing. He hummed while he worked, some old gospel tune my mother used to sing. His hands moved efficiently, adjusting tubes, checking monitors. Then he paused. I felt his stare boring into my face. "I know you're awake." His voice was low, barely above a whisper. "Your eyelids flutter when you're faking." "Real coma patients don't do that." My chest tightened, but I maintained the act. He couldn't know. Nobody could know until I figured out how to stop them. 3 days isn't much time. He continued his work, speaking like he was commenting on the weather. "But I've seen people recover from worse. Question is, what are you going to do about it?" He left without another word, the door whispering shut behind him. My fingers clenched around the call button, knuckles white with effort. The plastic case cracked slightly under the pressure. Rage flooded through my veins, hot and electric, forcing strength into muscles that had atrophied. I pulled my arm back across my body, faster this time. The pain was irrelevant now. Everything was irrelevant except survival. The blanket covering my legs suddenly felt like a shroud, and I kicked my right foot. It barely moved, just a small lift of the fabric, but it moved. The doctors were wrong. My body was fighting back, knitting itself together cell by cell, while my family planned my funeral. The wall clock read 2:47 p.m. Afternoon visiting hours ended at 4. That meant 113 minutes before someone else would come through that door. I tested my left leg. Nothing. Dead weight. But my right leg responded again, that same small movement. I focused all my energy there, willing the muscles to remember their purpose. Sweat beaded on my forehead from the exertion. My hospital gown clung to my back, damp and uncomfortable. I managed to bend my knee half an inch, a microscopic victory that felt monumental. Each small movement was a middle finger to the 4 votes counting me out. The door burst open. A young nurse I'd never seen entered with a meal tray, her ponytail swinging as she walked. She set it on the rolling table without looking at me, then checked her watch. "Feeding time, Mrs. Bennett. Let's sit you up." She cranked the bed mechanism, and my torso rose to a 45-degree angle. The room spun briefly before settling. From this position, I could see out the window. Gray clouds gathered over the parking lot, promising rain. A black sedan sat in the visitor section, one I recognized. My stomach dropped. The 4th vote had arrived early. The nurse's rubber-soled shoes squeaked against the linoleum as she positioned the tray. I kept my eyes fixed on that black sedan, watching for movement. The driver's door opened. Marcus, my eldest son, emerged wearing his charcoal suit, the one he saved for important occasions. Funerals, board meetings. Apparently, deciding his mother's fate qualified. My fingers curled against the bedsheets. The nurse spooned something beige and lumpy toward my mouth. I turned my head, still tracking Marcus through the window. He buttoned his jacket with deliberate precision, then pulled his phone from his pocket. His thumb moved across the screen, texting someone, coordinating. "Mrs. Bennett, you need to eat." The nurse's voice carried that practiced patience they taught in training. I ignored her. Marcus pocketed his phone and strode toward the hospital entrance, disappearing from view. My heart hammered against my ribs. The feeding tube in my arm suddenly felt like an anchor, tethering me to helplessness. I reached up with my left hand, the one that had been cooperating, and wrapped my fingers around it. The nurse grabbed my wrist. No, don't touch that." I pulled harder. The tape securing the tube stretched, adhesive biting into my skin. Pain shot up my arm, sharp and clarifying. The nurse pressed the call button with me free hand while wrestling my arm back down to the mattress. I need assistance in 412. Patient is combative. Combative. The word ricocheted through my skull. They wanted me compliant, quiet, easy to unplug. I yanked my arm again. The tape peeled back halfway. The nurse pressed her full weight against my shoulder, pinning me. Heavy footsteps approached in the hallway. Multiple sets. The door swung wide, and an orderly rushed in, followed by Marcus. My son's face registered shock for a split second before settling into that controlled mask he wore during business negotiations. "Mom?" His voice held careful modulation, pitched for an audience. I locked eyes with him. My free hand shot out, shoving the meal tray. It crashed to the floor, beige slop splattering across white tile. The plastic cup bounced twice. Cranberry juice spread like blood. The orderly grabbed my right arm. Between him and the nurse, they had me immobilized. I thrashed anyway, my right leg kicking weakly under the blanket. That small movement I'd worked so hard to achieve became a weapon. "She's been agitated all day," the nurse lied. Or maybe she believed it. Maybe to them, any sign of life from a supposed vegetable looked like agitation. Marcus moved closer, hands raised in a placating gesture. His wedding ring caught the fluorescent light. The same ring he'd worn when his father died, when he'd efficiently handled all the arrangements without shedding a single tear. "It's okay. I've got this." He nodded to the orderly and nurse. "Give us a minute." They exchanged glances. The nurse's grip loosened first, then the orderly's. They backed toward the door, leaving bloody footprints in the juice. The door clicked shut. Marcus pulled the visitor's chair close to the bed, the metal legs scraping across the floor. He sat, elbows on knees, studying me like a quarterly earnings report. "We need to talk about next steps." I spat at him. The saliva landed on his lapel, a small, wet stain darkening the expensive fabric. He didn't flinch. Just pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped it away with methodical strokes. "I understand you're angry." He refolded the handkerchief precisely. "But the doctors say there's been no improvement. Your brain activity is minimal." "The ventilator is doing most of the work." I forced air through my vocal cords. The sound that emerged was barely human, a guttural croak that hurt my throat. But it was sound. It was proof. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Reflexes. That's what Dr. Patterson called them. Involuntary responses. They don't mean recovery." I grabbed the bed rail with my left hand and pulled. My body shifted 3 inches to the side, deliberate, purposeful. Not a reflex. Marcus watched, his expression unreadable. Then he stood, smoothing his jacket where I'd spit on him. "Vanessa and Thomas are coming by tomorrow. We'll make the decision together, as a family." He headed for the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "I'm sorry, Mom, but keeping you like this, it's not living. Dad wouldn't have wanted it. You wouldn't have wanted it." The door closed behind him with a soft click. I lay there, chest heaving, muscles screaming from the exertion. Rain began pattering against the window. Through the glass, I watched Marcus return to his sedan, phone already pressed to his ear before he'd even opened the car door. My right leg twitched under the blanket, then my left. Both responding now, the neural pathways slowly remembering their maps. I had until tomorrow to prove I was still here, still fighting, still worth more than 4 votes and a do not resuscitate form. Strict character tracking. Characters established in previous blocks. Marcus, son, do not reuse. Marcus. Vanessa, mentioned not present. Thomas, mentioned not present. Dr. Patterson, mentioned. Available slots. 4 more characters can be introduced. Names I cannot use. Marcus, Vanessa, Thomas, Patterson. I worked through the night. Every hour, I focused on a different body part. Fingers first, curling them around the bed rail until my knuckles ached. Then toes, wiggling them inside the hospital socks until I could feel the cotton bunching beneath my arches. My jaw clicked when I opened and closed it, the muscles stiff from disuse, but the pain meant sensation. Pain meant life. The overnight nurse came in at 2 a.m. for vitals check. She moved quietly, professionally, humming something soft under her breath. When she leaned over to adjust my IV line, I turned my head and made eye contact. Deliberate, sustained. She froze, the IV bag hanging from her hand. My eyes widened, whites visible all around the irises. Then she blinked, shook her head slightly, and continued her work as if nothing had happened. But I saw her hands trembling as she marked my chart. I saw her glance back at me twice before leaving, her teeth worrying her bottom lip. By dawn, I could lift my right arm 6 inches off the mattress. The effort left me sweating, the hospital gown clinging to my back, but I did it 3 more times just to prove the first wasn't a fluke. My breathing came easier now without the ventilator doing all the work. Each inhale felt like dragging sandpaper through my lungs, but the rhythm was mine. Footsteps approached my door at 7:15. 2 sets, 1 heavy, 1 light and quick. The door swung open, and Vanessa entered first, her designer heels clicking against the linoleum. Behind her came Thomas, my youngest, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face unshaven. Vanessa looked immaculate, pressed blazer, pearl earrings, not a hair out of place in her sleek bob. She stopped at the foot of my bed, gripping her purse with both hands. Thomas hung back near the door, as if leaving himself an escape route. Neither of them spoke. They just stared at me like I was already a corpse, already a memory they were preparing to file away. I lifted my right hand off the blanket. Held it there, fingers spread, palm facing them. 5 seconds. 10. My arm shook with the strain, but I kept it raised until Vanessa gasped. "Oh my God!" She stumbled backward, bumping into the visitor chair. "Thomas, did you see?" "I saw." His voice was flat, careful. He moved closer, studying my face with the analytical expression he'd inherited from his father. "Mom, can you hear me?" I blinked once, held his gaze, blinked again. Thomas pulled out his phone, fingers flying across the screen. Vanessa circled to the side of the bed, keeping her distance, as if what I had might be contagious. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the dark circles beneath her eyes. "Marcus said you had some reflexes yesterday," she said slowly. "But this is—" "Thomas, call Dr. Patterson, now." "Already texting him." I concentrated on my vocal cords, trying to form words. What emerged was a harsh rasp, unintelligible, but unmistakably intentional. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. A tear rolled down her cheek, cutting through her foundation. The door banged open. Marcus strode in, still wearing yesterday's suit, his tie loosened and askew. He looked like he hadn't slept. His gaze swept the room, landing on Thomas's phone, then on Vanessa's tear-stained face. "What's going on?" Thomas turned the phone screen toward him. Whatever message was there made Marcus's jaw clench. He approached the bed slowly, his expensive leather shoes squeaking against the floor. When he looked down at me, his expression was unreadable, something between hope and fear, and something else I couldn't name. I raised my hand again. This time, I made a fist, thumb tucked inside, like I'd taught all 3 of them when they were little. "Our family signal. I love you." Then I released it, 1 finger at a time, showing control, showing intention. Marcus's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "The vote." he said hoarsely. We need to cancel the vote. Vanessa nodded rapidly, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing mascara across her temple. But Thomas didn't move. He stood with his arms crossed, phone dangling from one hand, watching me with those analytical eyes. We need to be sure, he said quietly. We need doctors, tests, not just movements. I wanted to scream at him. Instead, I lifted my left arm, the one that had been completely unresponsive yesterday. Lifted it despite the fire shooting through my shoulder, despite the trembling that seized my bicep. I held it there until Thomas's clinical expression cracked, until his eyes went shiny with unshed tears. The door burst open before Thomas could respond, and my oldest son strode in with 2 people in white coats trailing behind him. I'd never seen Marcus move with such purpose, such barely controlled fury. He gestured sharply toward my bed, and the doctors, one older man with gray temples, one younger woman with clipboard clutched tight, approached with cautious steps. Test her, Marcus demanded. Right now, whatever you need to do to confirm she's cognitive. The older doctor, whose badge read something I couldn't quite make out from this angle, moved to my bedside. He pulled a penlight from his pocket, the click of it loud in the sudden silence. My heart hammered against my ribs as he leaned close, bringing with him the scent of coffee and antiseptic. Mrs. Bennett, can you follow this light with your eyes? I tracked the beam left, then right, then up toward the fluorescent panels overhead. The movement made my head pound, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The doctor's weathered face remained neutral, professional, but I caught the slight widening of his eyes. Squeeze my hand once for yes, twice for no. Do you know where you are? I squeezed once, my grip weak but deliberate. Behind the doctors, Vanessa had moved to stand beside Marcus, both of them rigid with tension. Thomas remained by the window, phone still dangling from his fingers, watching everything with that same calculating expression that had always made him successful in business and distant in life. The younger doctor stepped forward, setting her clipboard on the bedside table with a soft clack. She produced a small device, began adjusting settings I couldn't see. We need to run a full neurological assessment, motor function tests, cognitive response evaluation, possibly an updated MRI to compare with the previous scans. How long? Marcus's voice came out raw. Several hours, maybe longer if we want comprehensive results. I watched Thomas finally move from his position. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, coming to stand at the foot of my bed. His knuckles were white where he gripped the metal railing, and when he spoke, his words fell like stones into still water. The vote was scheduled for noon, that's... He glanced at his watch, the silver one his father had given him before the cancer took him. In 47 minutes. Vanessa made a choked sound. We're not still doing that. Marcus said, I said we need to cancel it. Marcus turned on Thomas, and I saw muscles bunch in his shoulders beneath the wrinkled suit jacket. Call everyone. Tell them it's off. With what evidence? Thomas held up his phone, the screen dark now but still accusatory. Some hand movements? You know what the lawyers will say. What Aunt Patricia will argue. She's got the medical power of attorney documentation. She's got 3 specialists who've already signed off that Mom is... Don't! The word came from Marcus like a whip crack. Don't you dare finish that sentence. The female doctor cleared her throat, reaching for something in her pocket. I forced my right hand to move again, ignoring the screaming protests from muscles that felt like rusted machinery. My fingers found the bed control panel, pressed the button that would raise my upper body. The motor whirred, and everyone froze, watching as I slowly tilted into a more upright position. My left hand, the one that had been dead weight for 3 weeks, lifted again. This time, I pointed directly at Thomas. Then I moved my finger to trace letters in the air, each movement agonizingly slow, but unmistakable. N-O-V-O-T-E. The younger doctor's pen scratched rapidly across her clipboard. That's clear motor control and cognitive awareness, the ability to spell, to communicate abstract concepts. Thomas's phone buzzed, then Marcus's, then Vanessa's. The 3 devices created a discordant symphony of electronic chirps. Vanessa grabbed hers first, her face going pale as milk. "It's the family group chat," she whispered. "Aunt Patricia says everyone's gathered at her house. She says it's time to stop prolonging the inevitable, that keeping Mom in this state is cruel, that we need to think about her dignity." Something cold and sharp twisted in my chest. Patricia, my younger sister, who'd always resented that I'd inherited our mother's house. Patricia, who'd swooped in after my stroke with sympathetic words and legal documents. Patricia, who'd convinced my children that letting me go was the merciful choice. I grabbed the bed railing with my right hand, pulled myself further upright despite the fire spreading through my core. The heart monitor began beeping faster, alarm mixing with exertion. The male doctor reached toward me, probably to ease me back down, but I locked my elbow, holding firm. "Mom, don't. You'll hurt yourself." Vanessa moved forward, hands outstretched. I shook my head, the motion jerky but clear. Then I pointed at Marcus's phone, then at my mouth, then made a talking gesture with my hand, fingers opening and closing like a puppet. Marcus stared at me for 3 heartbeats. Then understanding dawned across his features like sunrise. "You want to talk to them, to Aunt Patricia and everyone else?" I nodded once, emphatic, despite the exhaustion dragging at my limbs. Story block 6. The room shifted into a flurry of motion. Marcus fumbled with his phone, nearly dropping it twice before his trembling fingers managed to navigate to the video call app. Vanessa positioned herself beside the bed, her hand hovering near my shoulder without quite touching, as if I might shatter under the slightest pressure. I watched the screen as Marcus initiated the call. My pulse hammered against my throat, each beat visible in the thin skin of my neck. The monitor behind me chirped faster, a digital metronome counting down to confrontation. Patricia's face materialized first, angular and familiar, her makeup perfect, even at this late hour. Behind her, I recognized the living room of her McMansion, the one she'd bought after divorcing her second husband. My nephew Kevin sat on the leather sofa, his expression uncomfortable. My brother Thomas stood near the fireplace, arms crossed. And there, in the wing chair that had belonged to our mother, sat my youngest son Garrett, who I hadn't seen in the 6 weeks since my stroke. "Marcus, this really isn't," Patricia began, but her words died when Marcus turned the phone toward me. I stared into the camera, forcing my left eye to focus despite the persistent droop. My right hand gripped the bed rail so hard my knuckles had gone pale, the veins standing out like mountain ridges under my skin. I opened my mouth, pushed air through my throat, and produced a sound that scraped like gravel over broken glass. "No!" The faces on the screen froze. Garrett's hand flew to his mouth. Kevin leaned forward, his eyes widening. Thomas's arms dropped to his sides. "Jesus Christ," Thomas whispered. "She's awake." Patricia recovered first, her features smoothing into a mask of concerned authority. She leaned toward her own camera, her voice dripping with false warmth. "Dawn, honey, you need to rest. The doctor said—" I shook my head, the movement violent enough to send pain cascading down my spine. My left arm twitched against the blanket, useless fingers curling into a partial claw. I raised my right hand, pointed directly at the screen, then tapped my chest twice. The message, "I'm here, I'm alive, I'm fighting." The young female doctor moved closer, her penlight clicking on as she examined my pupils. The beam stabbed into my retina, forcing me to squint. Behind her, the male doctor was typing frantically on a tablet, probably updating my chart with this miraculous display of consciousness. "Ms. Bennett, your blood pressure is spiking," the female doctor said. "We need to keep you calm." But calm was the last thing surging through my veins. I'd heard them. Heard every word of their cold calculation. Their vote on my existence like I was some corporate resolution to be passed or defeated. My sister's voice had been the loudest, the most insistent, painting my continued survival as a burden, a cruel prolonging of suffering. Marcus angled the phone closer. On screen, Patricia had composed herself, her expression shifting into what I recognized as her negotiation face, the one she used when trying to convince people that her self-interest was really everyone's best option. "Marcus, Vanessa, this doesn't change the medical reality. Your mother has suffered catastrophic damage. Even if she's showing some awareness now, the quality of life." I slammed my right fist against the bed rail. The impact sent shockwaves up my arm, rattling the IV line, making the fluid bag swing on its pole. The monitors erupted in a cacophony of alarms. Both doctors rushed forward, the female grabbing my wrist to check my pulse manually while the male reached for the controls to adjust medication levels. "Stop!" Vanessa's voice cut through the chaos. She stepped between the doctors and me, her body blocking their access. "Give her a minute. Just 1 minute." The female doctor hesitated, her fingers still pressed against my pulse point. "Her vitals are dangerously elevated. If she continues—" "1 minute," Vanessa repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. On the phone screen, Patricia's composure was cracking, her perfectly lined lips pressed into a thin line. Thomas had moved closer, his hand gripping the back of Garrett's chair. My youngest son looked like he might vomit, his face the color of old newspaper. I forced myself to breathe through my nose, slow and measured despite the fire blazing through every nerve. The right side of my body was screaming, muscles locked in sustained tension. My left side felt like dead weight, an anchor dragging me down. But I was still here, still present, still fighting. With painstaking care, I lifted my right hand and pressed it flat against my chest, over my heart. Then I pointed at Garrett, holding his gaze through the screen. His eyes filled with tears that spilled down his cheeks in silent tracks. "Mom!" he choked out. "Mom, I'm sorry. We thought—" Patricia's hand shot out, gripping his shoulder hard enough that he winced. Her voice turned sharp, defensive. "We were trying to do the right thing. The doctor said the chances of meaningful recovery were minimal. We were trying to spare her." I pointed at Patricia, then made a slashing motion across my throat. The gesture was crude, unmistakable. The monitors were still shrieking, the female doctor pleading with Vanessa to let her intervene, but I didn't stop. I pressed my palm against my chest again, tapped it 3 times, then spread my fingers wide. Here, alive, 5 children, not Patricia's decision. The room spun suddenly, edges blurring into watercolor smears. My hand dropped to the mattress, strength evaporating like water on summer concrete. The female doctor pushed past Vanessa, her fingers already working to increase the sedative drip. "That's enough. She's going into distress." The chemical drowsiness swept through my veins like thick honey. but I fought it with everything I had left. My fingers clawed at the sheets, bunching the starched fabric into my fist. The tablet screen went dark. Vanessa had ended the call, or someone on the other end had disconnected. Either way, Patricia's face vanished, taking with it the last of my explosive fury. What remained was something colder, something that crystallized in my chest like frost spreading across glass. The female doctor, the one whose name I still didn't know, adjusted something on the IV pole. Her movements were efficient, practiced, but I caught the slight tremor in her hands. She avoided my eyes as she checked the monitors, watching the jagged lines smooth into gentler waves. "Your vitals are stabilizing," she said quietly. "But that kind of exertion could have triggered another stroke. Do you understand that?" I managed the smallest nod, my eyelids already growing heavy. The sedative wrapped around my consciousness like cotton wool, muffling everything. But before the darkness could claim me completely, I forced my eyes to find Vanessa. She stood near the window, the tablet clutched against her chest like a shield. My face was pale, drawn tight with something that looked like fear, or maybe guilt. I tried to lift my hand again, to signal her closer, but my arm wouldn't cooperate. The muscles had gone slack, useless. A small sound escaped my throat, frustration mixed with exhaustion. Vanessa crossed to the bedside in 3 quick steps, setting the tablet aside and grasping my hand in both of hers. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Mom, I swear I didn't know they'd taken a vote. Patricia called it a family meeting 2 days ago, but I was covering a double shift at the restaurant. She said they were just discussing care options." The sedative pulled harder, dragging me down into murky depths. But even as my vision tunneled, I squeezed Vanessa's fingers with what little strength remained. She understood. Her shoulders dropped, some of the tension bleeding out. "I'll call everyone," she said. "The real conversation happens when you're stronger. No more decisions without you." The darkness swallowed me whole. When I surfaced again, the room was dim. Night had fallen, transforming the hospital windows into black mirrors that reflected the equipment's blinking lights. My mouth tasted like rust and chemicals. The right side of my face throbbed with each heartbeat, a relentless drum that pounded behind my eye socket. A figure sat in the chair beside my bed. Not Vanessa. This person was broader, with shoulders that hunched forward in a posture of exhaustion. As my eyes adjusted, details emerged. Male, dark skin, salt and pepper hair cropped close to his skull. He wore jeans and a wrinkled button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. My youngest son, Marcus. He'd inherited his father's build, thick through the chest and arms from years of construction work. His hands were folded between his knees, head bowed, like he was praying or sleeping or both. I tried to speak, but my throat produced only a dry rasp. The sound was enough. Marcus's head snapped up, and in the monitor's blue glow, I saw his eyes were red-rimmed and swollen. "Hey, Mama!" His voice cracked on the second word. "Vanessa called me, told me what happened with the video call." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and rubbed both hands over his face. When he looked at me again, tears tracked down his cheeks in silent streams. "I voted no," he said. "I need you to know that. When Patricia made everyone weigh in, I said absolutely not. You're the strongest person I know, and if anyone could come back from this, it's you." He paused, swallowing hard. "Garrett voted no too, and Thomas? He wasn't even on the call. Patricia said he was too emotional to participate, which is bullshit. She didn't want anyone who'd disagree with her." The rage I'd felt earlier flickered back to life, but it was banked now, controlled. I focused on my right hand, willing the fingers to move. They twitched, then curled slightly. Marcus saw the movement and reached out, his large hand engulfing mine. 2 against 2, he continued. The vote was supposed to be a tie, but Patricia counted herself twice. Once as herself, and once as representing Dad's wishes since he died last year. She claimed he'd told her once that he wouldn't want to be kept alive on machines. My fingers spasmed in Marcus's grip. The monitor beside my bed registered my spike in heart rate with a series of sharp beeps. A nurse appeared in the doorway, her silhouette backlit by the hallway's fluorescent glare. She checked the screen, then looked at Marcus with clear disapproval. She needs rest. You have 5 more minutes. Marcus nodded without looking away from me. The nurse retreated, her rubber-soled shoes squeaking against the linoleum. When we were alone again, he squeezed my hand gently. Vanessa's getting Thomas and Garrett together tomorrow. We're going to figure this out, Mama. Patricia doesn't get to make decisions for you. His jaw tightened, muscles bunching beneath his skin. She never did. I managed to squeeze back, pouring every ounce of agreement I could muster into that small pressure. Marcus understood. He lifted my hand and pressed it against his forehead, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. We stayed like that until the nurse returned and made him leave. Processing consistency check current named characters. 1. I, protagonist, 53, African-American woman. 2. Marcus, son. 3. Patricia, daughter who tried to pull the plug. 4. Vanessa, another family member. 5. Thomas, family member 6. Garrett, family member first names used. Dawn, Marcus, Patricia, Vanessa, Thomas, Garrett, remaining slots. 2. The physical therapy room smelled of industrial disinfectant and the rubber mats beneath the parallel bars. I gripped the metal rails with both hands, knuckles white, arms trembling from the effort of keeping myself upright. 3 weeks since Marcus's revelation, and my legs still felt like they belonged to someone else. Distant, unreliable things that barely responded to my commands. Patricia stood 15 feet away near the door, her arms crossed over her designer blazer. She'd shown up unannounced during my session, dismissing the therapist with a curt wave and a lie about needing family time. The therapist had reluctantly left us alone, casting worried glances back through the observation window. "You're being ridiculous," Patricia said, her voice sharp and clinical. "All this effort, and for what? So you can shuffle around with a walker for a few years before the next stroke takes you out?" My left foot slid forward 6 inches. The movement sent fire up my thigh, but I bit down on the inside of my cheek and forced my right foot to follow. The parallel bars dug into my palms. Sweat ran down my spine, soaking through the thin hospital gown. "I'm trying to have a conversation with you." Patricia's heels clicked against the floor as she moved closer. "The medical bills are astronomical. Your insurance is maxed out. Do you even understand what you're doing to this family?" Another step. My right knee buckled slightly, but I locked it, refusing to fall. The heart monitor attached to my chest beeped faster. Through the window, I could see the therapist standing up from her desk, phone in hand. Patricia was beside me now, her perfume, something expensive and floral, cutting through the antiseptic smell. She reached out and grabbed the parallel bar just ahead of my right hand, blocking my path. Her manicured nails gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "Stop being selfish," she hissed, leaning in close enough that I could see the fine lines around her mouth, the tightness in her jaw. "You'd have died peacefully if Marcus hadn't interfered. No pain, No struggle, no bankrupting your children. The fury that had been building since I'd learned about the vote erupted through my chest. I released my grip on the left bar and shoved her. Hard. The movement was instinctive, powered by 3 weeks of suppressed rage and every physical therapy session where I'd pushed past the pain. Patricia stumbled backward, her eyes wide with shock, arms pinwheeling for balance. She crashed into a rack of resistance bands, sending the entire structure toppling with a metallic clatter that echoed off the walls. I stood there, swaying, holding the right bar with only one hand. My breath came in ragged gasps. The room tilted slightly, but I planted my feet and stayed upright through sheer will. Patricia scrambled to her knees among the tangle of elastic bands and metal frames, her perfect composure shattered. A red mark was already forming on her shoulder where she'd hit the rack. The door burst open. The therapist rushed in, followed by 2 orderlies in navy blue scrubs. Behind them, Marcus appeared, his face a mask of fury when he saw Patricia on the floor and me still standing at the bars. "She attacked me!" Patricia shrieked, pointing at me with a shaking hand. "She's violent! She needs to be restrained!" Marcus moved past the orderlies before they could reach me. He positioned himself between Patricia and the parallel bars, his broad frame blocking her from view. One of the orderlies, a young man with concerned eyes, approached me carefully, hands raised in a calming gesture. "Ma'am, let's get you sitting down," he said softly. "Nobody's restraining anybody. We just need to make sure you're okay." I nodded, allowing him and the therapist to support me as they guided me toward the wheelchair positioned against the wall. My legs were rubber now, the adrenaline fading and leaving only exhaustion in its wake. But I kept my eyes locked on Patricia as they lowered me into the chair. I wanted her to see that I was still here, still fighting, still very much alive. Patricia climbed to her feet, brushing off her blazer with jerky, agitated movements. A security officer entered the room, his radio crackling with static. The therapist was explaining the situation in a low, urgent voice, while Marcus stood perfectly still, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You all saw it," Patricia insisted, her voice rising. "She's unstable, dangerous. This proves she can't make rational decisions about her own care." Marcus turned toward her, and something in his movement made everyone in the room freeze. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper, but filled with such controlled rage that it cut through Patricia's hysteria like a blade. "Get out!" Patricia's mouth opened, then closed. She looked around the room, searching for allies, but the therapist was focused on checking my blood pressure, and the orderlies had stepped back, clearly unwilling to involve themselves in family drama. The security officer stood by the door, hand resting on his radio, watching everything with professional detachment. "This isn't over," Patricia said, snatching her purse from where it had fallen. She stalked toward the door, pausing only to look back at me one last time. "You're going to destroy everything Dad built, everything we worked for." She left, her heels hammering an angry rhythm down the hallway. The security officer followed at a discreet distance. The room felt larger in her absence, easier to breathe in. Marcus knelt beside my wheelchair, his earlier fury draining away to reveal naked concern. He examined my hands, where the parallel bars had left angry red marks across my palms. "I'm okay," I managed, the words slightly slurred but understandable. My first full sentence in weeks. The afternoon sun had shifted by the time the physical therapist finally cleared me to return to my room. My muscles trembled with exhaustion, each small movement requiring conscious effort. Marcus wheeled me through the corridors himself, waving away the orderly who had appeared to take over. His hands gripped the wheelchair handles with white-knuckled intensity. and I could feel the tension radiating through the frame with every turn. Back in my room, he helped me transfer to the bed. The process was clumsy, my legs still unreliable, but his patience never wavered. He adjusted the pillows behind my back and pulled the thin hospital blanket over my legs with careful precision. Then he sat heavily in the visitor's chair, running both hands through his hair in a gesture I recognized from our childhood, the one that meant he was about to say something difficult. "I filed the restraining order paperwork this morning," he said finally. "Before I came here, Patricia can't come within 500 feet of you or contact you in any way." I nodded, relief washing through me in waves that made my eyes burn. My hands fumbled for the water cup on the bedside table. Marcus stood immediately, guiding the straw to my lips and holding the cup steady while I drank. The cool liquid soothed my throat, still raw from weeks of intubation. He set the cup down and pulled something from his jacket pocket, a thick manila envelope, edges worn from handling. He opened it slowly, spreading documents across the rolling table that spanned my bed. Financial statements, email printouts, legal correspondence dating back 3 years. I squinted at the familiar letterhead of my father's company, then at Patricia's signature scrawled across authorization forms. "I've been documenting everything since Dad got sick," Marcus said quietly. His finger traced a line of numbers on one of the statements. "She's been siphoning money from the business accounts. Small amounts at first, then larger transfers. She forged Dad's signature on dozens of contracts, redirected vendor payments to shell companies she set up." I leaned forward, ignoring the protest from my weakened core muscles. The numbers swam before my eyes, but the pattern was clear. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe more, systematically stolen over years. My father had trusted Patricia completely, had given her power of attorney when his dementia diagnosis came through. I had used that trust like a weapon. "There's more." Marcus pulled out another sheet, this one covered in handwritten notes. "I talked to 3 of the nurses who worked Dad's final weeks at home. Patricia pressured them to increase his morphine doses, kept insisting he was in pain even when he wasn't. She wanted him gone before he could change his will again." My breath caught. The implications crashed over me like ice water. Our father's death hadn't been the peaceful passing Patricia had described at the funeral. She had orchestrated it, pushed for it, maybe even hastened it, and then she had turned those same calculating eyes toward me. I reached for the notepad the speech therapist had left on my bedside table. My hand shook as I gripped the pen, but I managed to scratch out 3 words. "Tell the police." Marcus shook his head slowly. "That's your decision to make, not mine. If we report this, it destroys the family completely. Patricia goes to prison. The business Dad built, your inheritance, gets tied up in legal battles for years. Everyone will know." He gathered the papers carefully, squaring the edges with methodical precision. "Or we use this as leverage. I make it clear that these documents exist, that they're in a safe deposit box with instructions to go to the authorities if anything happens to you or me. Patricia backs off permanently, and we quietly buy her out of the company. She disappears from our lives." I stared at the papers, then at Marcus's face. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows under his eyes, highlighting exhaustion I hadn't noticed before. He had been carrying this burden alone, building this case while I lay unconscious and vulnerable, protecting me the only way he knew how. My hand moved across the notepad again, the pen leaving shaky letters. What about justice? Justice? Marcus's laugh was bitter, harsh in the quiet room. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot below. Patricia already voted to let you die. She stood in this hospital and argued for pulling your plug like she was deciding what to order for lunch. That's who she is." He turned back to face me, and something in his expression had hardened. "But if she's in prison, we spend the next decade in courtrooms, testifying, reliving everything, and you need to focus on getting better, not on revenge." The word hung between us. Revenge. Not justice. Revenge. I understood the distinction, felt its weight pressing against my chest. Justice meant courts and procedures and the slow grinding of legal machinery. Revenge meant Patricia living in fear, looking over her shoulder, knowing the evidence existed, but never knowing when it might be used. I wrote carefully. "She killed Dad." "Probably," Marcus said, his voice flat. "But we can't prove it. The nurses will testify she pressured them, but they followed legal protocols. Any decent lawyer argues she was just an overwhelmed daughter trying to ease her father's suffering." He picked up the envelope and held it out to me. "This is yours. The financial crimes, the forgeries, that's solid. But you decide what happens next." "I'll support whatever you choose." 6 months later, the morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows of my new apartment, casting geometric patterns across the hardwood floor I had insisted on despite the extra cost. My coffee steamed in the oversized mug Bianca had given me, white ceramic with bold black letters reading, "Still Here." I ran my thumb along the rim, feeling the slight imperfection where the glaze had bubbled during firing. The rehabilitation center's discharge papers sat in a folder on my desk, marked with the date 3 months prior. Physical therapy had rebuilt the muscle mass I'd lost during those weeks in the hospital bed. My legs carried me now through morning jogs along the riverfront, each footfall a reminder that my body belonged to me again. The tremor in my right hand had faded to an occasional flutter when I was tired or stressed. I crossed to the living room where cardboard boxes still waited to be unpacked. The new job at the community legal aid office started Monday. Clerical work initially, but the director had promised opportunities to advance. My fingers traced the edge of a frame I'd pulled from bubble wrap the night before. The photograph showed my father at my college graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us laughing at something now forgotten. I placed it on the bookshelf between a potted succulent and my physical therapy achievement certificate. The envelope from Marcus lived in my safe deposit box downtown, untouched, since he'd handed it to me in that hospital room. Patricia's forged signatures, the financial records, the nurse testimonies, all of it sleeping in darkness. Some nights I drove to the bank and sat in my car outside, keys in hand, imagining the walk inside. The cold metal of the key, the private viewing room, the decision. But I always drove home. My phone buzzed on the counter, a text from Marcus checking if I needed anything before he headed to his construction site. He called every morning now, a ritual we'd established in those early weeks after discharge, when walking to the bathroom felt like climbing Everest. I typed back a quick response, added a coffee emoji, set the phone down. The yoga mat waited rolled up by the window. I spread it across the floor, feeling the textured surface beneath my palms as I moved into child's pose. My therapist had suggested morning meditation to process the residual trauma. The nightmares had decreased from nightly terrors to occasional disturbances, usually dreams where I was paralyzed again, screaming without sound, while figures in white coats discussed my organs like cuts of meat at a butcher shop. Breathing deeply, I shifted into downward dog. My hamstrings protested but held. Everything protested but held these days. The doorbell chimed. I grabbed a towel and moved through the apartment, checking the peephole before opening. Bianca stood in the hallway holding a bakery box and 2 paper cups from the coffee shop downstairs. "Thought you might want company," she said, stepping inside when I waved her through. Plus, I got those almond croissants you've been craving. We settled at my kitchen table. A sturdy oak piece I'd found at an estate sale, scarred but solid. Bianca opened the box, and the scent of butter and almonds filled the space between us. She talked about her new girlfriend, a ceramicist who worked in a studio near the harbor. I listened and ate and felt the normalcy of it settle into my bones, like calcium strengthening after a break. "You hear from her at all?" Bianca asked after a comfortable silence. She didn't need to specify who. I shook my head. Patricia had moved to Arizona shortly after my discharge. Marcus had mentioned it in passing once, his voice carefully neutral. My sister had sold her house, resigned from her hospital position, vanished into the desert like a rattlesnake retreating under rocks. Whether she fled from fear or shame or simply wanted distance from her failures, I didn't know and had stopped trying to guess. "Good," Bianca said firmly. She brushed crumbs from her fingers and stood. "You working today?" "Just unpacking, making this place feel like mine." After she left, I returned to the boxes. I unpacked my father's medical journals, his reading glasses still tucked in the spine of a cardiology textbook. His handwriting filled the margins, notes and questions and observations from a mind that never stopped analyzing. I ran my finger across his looping script, then shelved the books carefully in the living room. The afternoon stretched into evening. I ordered Thai food and ate it straight from the containers while watching the news. Political scandals and weather reports and feel-good stories about rescued animals washed over me. When my phone rang, an unknown number, I let it go to voicemail. Then curiosity pulled me to the message. "Ms. Bennett, this is Gerald from the bank." A pause, the sound of papers shuffling. "Your safe deposit box rental is coming up for renewal next month. Please contact us to discuss your options." I deleted the message and stared at the dark screen of my phone. The decision lived in me like a seed that refused to germinate, neither growing nor dying, just existing in potential. Some days I imagined walking into a police station with the envelope, watching Patricia's carefully constructed new life collapse like a house of marked cards. Other days, I imagined burning it all, watching years of Marcus's investigation curl into ash and smoke. But mostly, I imagined nothing. I got up and went to work and lived my life while the possibility of justice sat locked away in darkness. My therapist said this was healthy, choosing forward motion over backward vengeance. Marcus said it was my choice, and he'd respect whatever I decided. Bianca said Patricia was probably miserable in Arizona anyway, sweating in the desert heat and looking over her shoulder every time someone knocked on her door. I thought they were all probably right. The sun set beyond my windows, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I poured another cup of coffee, though it was too late for caffeine, held the warm mug between both palms, and watched the city lights begin to sparkle in the growing darkness. 6 months ago, I had been a body in a bed, a problem to be solved, a plug to be pulled. My family had gathered and debated my worth like I was furniture they needed to decide whether to keep or donate. They had voted on my death with the casual practicality of choosing a restaurant. But I was still here. My breath moved in and out of my lungs. My heart pumped blood through vessels and chambers that had kept working when everyone else had given up. My brain fired synapses and formed thoughts and held memories both beautiful and terrible. I was still here, and that was enough. The envelope could wait another month, another year, forever, if that's what I chose. Patricia lived with her guilt in the desert heat, and I lived with my coffee and my new apartment and my morning jogs along the river. We had both made our choices, and now we lived with the consequences. I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, set it in the dish rack to dry. Tomorrow I would unpack more boxes. Monday, I would start my new job. Next month, I would decide about the safe deposit box, or maybe I wouldn't decide at all. For now, I was simply alive, and that victory was sweeter than any revenge could ever taste. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.